School's out forever. Today we're going to talk about school, why it's not as important as you think it was, and 6 reasons you forget everything you ever learned at school. Hello everyone, hate to break it to you, but your school years weren't exactly what you thought they were. Now, there's a role for schools, there's definitely a role for education, all the way back to Plato's Academy, all the way back to the ancient schools, that the Vedic texts in India. However, the modern school is a modern invention, and modern inventions quite often revolve around capitalism if they're modern. And I want to talk about that today and help you get an understanding of the difference between intellect, memorization, and the collective unconscious. So as always, I'm going to start with a quote from a very learned man. The only way you can invent tomorrow is if you break out of the enclosure that the school system has provided for you by the exams written by people who are trained in another generation. I'll say that again. The only way you can invent tomorrow is if you break out of the enclosure that the school system has provided for you by the exams written by people who are trained in another generation. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Now, Neil is basically the hero of science right now. He's a tall black dude who's incredibly smart and presents very, very well, and has become sort of the go-to guy for astrophysics in particular, but now just science. And even he's saying that you've got to be careful about schools. They're not all what they say. So let me help you understand the modern invention of school. So learning has always been important. Learning has always been at the heart of human development, but what are schools all about? And I'm going to use a word that may be familiar for most of you as kindergarten. Okay. But to think about your native language, unless German, and think about the word kindergarten, and I want you to ask yourself a question. Does the word kindergarten exist in my native language? If the answer is no, it has been transplanted into your language. So why was it transplanted into your language, and where did it come from? Here's the story. Once again, it's a free translation. You can look it up on Wikipedia. If I get the dates wrong, so be it. Anyway, long story short, the Prussian army, which is sort of like West Germany, where sort of West Germany, Poland is now, was an incredible force. And it was known as one of the elite fighting forces of the area. And back then you had these kings just rolling around telling people that to fight this, fight that. So army is very, very important. Anyway, the Prussians were, and I believe it was by Napoleon's forces, that the Prussians were seen to be able to stand up to Napoleon. So when Napoleon said, I'm going to go to Russia, he had to go through the Prussians, and he whitewashed them. People were shocked because they felt the Prussians were trained enough and elite soldiers to take on Napoleon's troops. They didn't realise they had a genius in Napoleon. So what happened was there was like a royal commission or an investigation on why so many troops fled the battlefield when faced by Napoleon. And a few concepts seemed to rear their head. One, that the soldiers didn't really feel an allegiance to the Prussian army. You've got to remember at the time, nation states weren't really new, and it was basically your hometown was where either your last name would come from or where you'd have your allegiance to. So the idea of nation states wasn't in people's heads. And also the concept that people were questioning why they were fighting. They were questioning it, so they fled. So the Prussian, royalty and government and the dudes that were in charge thought, well, we've got to fix this. We've got to create a system that stops people thinking this way. And they created kindergarten, which was a way of putting the citizens of their country through a system that would indoctrinate them into understanding that the nation state is important, what the nation tells them is true, and that they should fight to the death for their nation. And this indoctrination began with the authority figures of teachers, and then moved on to the concept of nationhood and fighting and dying for your country, which has led to the murderous exploits of World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc., East Timor, etc., etc., etc. Not a good thing. Now, this system was then investigated by other countries, in particular the British. The British, who were building a better land army at the time, checked out what the Prussians were doing, going, let's do this. And they transplanted the schooling structure, the kindergarten, and even kept that word for the most basic levels in their vernacular. I sort of intrinsically felt this at school. I was always getting into hot debate with my teachers about their certainty that certain things were true from the textbooks. And I was like, this is the 3rd edition of the textbook, so I'm sure you're telling the dude 5 years ago who had the 1st edition that this was unquestionable, but now there's 3 editions, something must have changed, therefore the truth is not always exactly as we see it. Obviously that didn't get me very far with the teachers. They didn't see that as cute as I think some people see that now. So what are the 6 ways that What are the 6 reasons we should forget everything that we've learned at school? Well, the first reason is that history is always written by the victors. And the people who are the victors write the tales of the stories and how they got there. For example, Americans never talk about the embargo and blockade that stopped fuel and oil going to Japan, which caused starvation and freezing of children, that would then lead to Japan breaking out of that embargo by attacking at Pearl Harbor. They start the story at Pearl Harbor because they're the victors and they can write that story. Now, I'm not casting any illusions on who was right and wrong in World War II. I'm just saying that be careful what you learn because it's always written by the victors, and we know that all stories have 2 sides. Number 2, indoctrination. You have indoctrination. So you are taken through a series of sets of unquestioning things and you are molded into a student. You're molded. Now, a student is someone who wants to learn, but not in a school system. A student is someone who's subordinate, that doesn't speak out for themselves and just basically is clay to be molded. 3, you're told in school that science is the only tool. Unless you went to a religious school, of course. But we know there's a balance between spirit and science, and unfortunately schools don't really teach us that. 4, repetition, repetition, repetition. The intelligence that you collect is just repeating numbers and data. Birth date of George Washington, when was the Magna Carta? Actually, it's the 700th anniversary. Anyway, there you go. Trying to remember numbers. Magna Carta was important. What was more important? The humans that risked their lives to write the Magna Carta, not the date it was written on. So what I'm talking about is how you're repetitively told to think of the future and the past. Who's this historical figure? What will the world be like in 20 years? It takes you out of the moment. It trains you to take out of the moment. That's why it's such a difference when you go to Thailand to someone who wasn't in a similar schooling system. They're so happy because they're in the moment versus us who's always thinking about past and future. 5, your intelligence and worth cannot be measured in numbers and careers. School is always about giving you a number, telling you that if you work hard you could become something. You're already something. You are the cosmos divinely entering a unique field of subjectivity to collapse the entire waveform to a series of events that can be understood and bring life to the universe. Whether you get an A+ or a D isn't really that important. Your self-worth, it's great to get great grades. I've got daughters who go through school. I hope they get great grades, but at the same time it's not going to make them better. And finally, what does school teach you and why should you just dump it? It teaches that authority is king and authority is the only thing that matters. You know, I remember being told just because I told you. I remember going to the principal was the scariest thing in the world. I thought I was meeting the executioner. It just instills into you that some people are better than you because of their role and their own questioning. Not true. We're all born, we all die, we're all men, we're all women, we're all life, and we're all equal. And someone's label does not make them an authority. Their character and what they have to give to the world lifts them above and makes them someone to be worth listening to. That's how we should judge people, not on whether they're a principal or a teacher. I can't wait to see you till tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.